The nursery was Emily's dream made real. She had spent months imagining it, sketching out ideas in the quiet hours when the baby kicked and fluttered inside her. The walls were the softest shade of cream, kissed by sunlight in the morning and glowing warm under the lamp at night. The air carried the gentle scent of lavender sachets tucked into drawers, blending with the faint sweetness of baby powder. Every piece of furniture was chosen with care, every corner touched by her vision. The crib stood like a promise in the center of the room's sleek white wood, polished until it shone. Beside it, a rocking chair waited for late-night lullabies, its cushions the perfect softness for tired arms. On the shelf, picture books were stacked neatly, their covers bursting with colors. Waiting for a child who hadn't yet taken their first breath, Emily's fingers lingered over the mobile. She had hung above the crib a delicate circle of stars and clouds that swayed with the slightest movement of air. It was a sanctuary, not just for the baby, but for her. In the chaos of the outside world, this was the one place untouched. Pure, sacred. The rest of the house, however, carried an undercurrent of tension. Daniel had been distant for weeks, slipping out early, returning late, smelling faintly of perfume that didn't belong to Emily. She told herself she was imagining it, that her pregnancy made her oversensitive, but deep down her instincts whispered the truth she didn't want to hear. She ignored the voice, clinging to the hope that once the baby came, everything would return to the way it used to be, when Daniel would hold her hand for no reason, when his laughter filled the kitchen. That morning began like any other. Emily was arranging tiny clothes in the wardrobe, humming softly when she heard it. A sudden, sharp crack like a whip slicing the air. She froze, her hand resting on a pale yellow onesie. Another sound followed, louder this time, glass shattering. Her heart thudded in her ears as she stepped into the hallway. The sound came from the nursery, the very place she had protected, planned, and poured her heart into when she reached the doorway. The sight stole the breath from her chest. The mobile lay twisted on the floor, its stars bent and broken. The shelf had been torn from the wall, books scattered and pages ripped. The crib she had imagined rocking her baby in was in pieces, its frame cracked and splintered like bones. Shards of glass from a picture frame glittered on the carpet like cruel confetti, and in the middle of the destruction stood Vanessa. Emily had seen her before once, in a blurry photograph she wasn't meant to find, tucked away in Daniel's phone. Vanessa was striking, with a calculated kind of beauty that didn't happen by accident. Her hair, dark as midnight, fell in perfect waves. Her red lipstick was unblemished. Even now, as she stood amid the chaos she had made, Vanessa wasn't panting from the effort. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even pretending to be surprised by Emily's presence. Instead, she leaned slightly to one side, her hand on her hip, and let her eyes drift lazily around the ruined room before settling on Emily. "Pretty room," Vanessa said, her voice smooth, each word deliberate. "But it's not yours to have." The sentence hit harder than any scream could have. It wasn't just about the nursery. Emily heard the venom beneath the words, the claim Vanessa was making not only on the space, but on her life. Emily's throat tightened. "Get out." Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile meant to cut rather than comfort. She took a step closer, her heels pressing into the carpet, leaving tiny indents that would remain long after she was gone. "Funny thing about dreams, Emily. Sometimes they belong to someone else before you even realize it." Emily's hands curled into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream, to throw Vanessa out physically, but her body was heavy with the child she carried. She knew that in this moment, reacting would only give Vanessa the satisfaction she clearly wanted. So she stood there, silent, watching as Vanessa's gaze swept the room one last time before she turned on her heel and walked out. The faint click of her heels echoed down the hallway, a sound Emily would remember far too well. When the front door closed, the silence that followed was deafening. Emily stepped fully into the nursery, her bare feet brushing over broken pieces of her dream. The lavender scent was gone, replaced by the cold smell of splintered wood and disturbed dust. She bent down to pick up the mobile, her fingers trembling. One of the tiny stars dangled by a single thread, Swaying gently as if mocking her, her knees buckled, and she sank onto the carpet, cradling the broken mobile against her chest. She thought of the nights she had stayed up late, scrolling through baby names while Daniel worked late or said he did. She thought of how she had smiled through morning sickness, swollen ankles, and endless appointments, believing they were building something together. And now, with one act of destruction, Vanessa had made her message clear. Emily was no longer the only one in Daniel's world. Outside the nursery window, the day was bright and unbothered. Children's laughter drifted from a house down the street. Life went on, indifferent to the wreckage inside this home. But Emily sat still, letting the truth settle in her chest. Like a stone dot, it wasn't just the nursery that had been broken. Something far deeper had shattered, and she didn't yet know if it could ever be rebuilt. She pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the faint, reassuring movement beneath her palm. This baby was still coming, no matter what had been destroyed. And somewhere beneath the ache, a flicker of resolve began to burn. She didn't know what she would do yet. But she knew this Vanessa had just declared war. And Emily, though quiet now, would not stay quiet forever, if you'd like. I can now expand the rising tension section in the same cinematic, emotionally charged style so it flows seamlessly from here into the turning point of the story. That will keep the pacing and suspense perfectly balanced. Would you like me to continue? Daniel didn't speak of that day. Not once. In the hours after Vanessa's intrusion, Emily waited for him to come home, to look at the wreckage and feel the outrage she felt, to take her hands and promise that he'd make it right. Instead, he walked in late that night, loosened his tie without meeting her eyes, and said only, "I heard what happened." She waited for more, for an apology, for a plan, but what came was a weary sigh. "It's complicated, Emily." She was, upset? Upset? Her voice cracked on the word. "She destroyed the nursery, Daniel, our baby's nursery." He rubbed the back of his neck and kept his gaze on the floor. "I'll have it fixed." Emily stared at him, feeling the distance between them widen like a chasm. Fixing the room wouldn't fix the betrayal in his silence, nor the fact that he wasn't angry with Vanessa. If anything, he seemed protective of her. That hurt more than the sight of splintered wood and shredded clothes. The days that followed felt like living in the shadow of something poisonous. The nursery door stayed closed. Emily couldn't bring herself to step inside. She would pass by it in the hallway and feel her chest tighten, hearing again the smug curl in Vanessa's voice. Daniel buried himself in work, coming home later. And later, often smelling faintly of the same perfume. Emily's pregnancy slowed her body, but sharpened her mind. She thought about the way Vanessa had looked at her, not like a rival, but like someone claiming a victory. She realized then that, if she kept playing defense, she would lose far more than a room. One afternoon, while Daniel was gone, Emily drove to the edge of town. She had heard about a small baby store that carried handmade cribs, soft organic blankets, and toys crafted by local artisans. The kind of place where every item had a story. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside, the scent of cedar, and fresh linen wrapping around her like comfort. An older woman stood behind the counter, her gray hair pinned neatly, her warm smile genuine. "First time here?" she asked. Emily nodded, running her fingers over a row of tiny knitted hats. "It's beautiful." The woman introduced herself as Margaret. As Emily wandered, they spoke about babies, about the joy of preparing for one, about the hard parts too. Emily didn't tell her about the nursery, not yet. But something about the shop's quiet charm felt like the antidote to the chaos Vanessa had left behind. When Emily returned a few days later, Margaret was alone, sitting at the counter with a stack of papers and a deep frown. "I'm closing soon," she admitted. "The business is more than I can manage now." Emily leaned against the counter. "Closing? But this place—" She trailed off, glancing at the rows of cribs and shelves of soft toys. Margaret shrugged. "It's either sell it or let it fade away." "I'd rather sell to someone who cares about it." The idea struck Emily like a spark in the dark. She had been feeling powerless, cornered. But here was something she could build, something no one could take from her. "I'll take it," she said. Margaret blinked. "Just like that?" Emily smiled faintly. "Just like that?" The paperwork moved quickly. Emily used her own inheritance, untouched since her father's passing, to make the down payment. Each time she signed a form, she felt herself reclaiming something that Vanessa had tried to steal, her sense of control, her identity as more than just the woman waiting for her husband's choices. Daniel didn't notice at first. When he did, he asked casually over breakfast, "So you've been going into town a lot lately, something you're not telling me?" Emily met his eyes. "I bought a store." He blinked, surprised. "A store? What kind?" "A baby store," she said evenly. "It's mine now," he chuckled without warmth. "Seems like a strange time to start a business, considering what?" she asked, her voice cool. He didn't answer, only shook his head and glanced at his phone. Weeks later, word spread that Vanessa had made a brilliant investment. At one of the social gatherings Daniel dragged Emily to, she overheard Vanessa's lilting voice bragging about buying a baby store on the edge of town. She laughed softly, telling her circle of friends how she would transform it into something more modern and less sentimental. Emily's blood went cold. She kept her face composed, but her mind raced. She hadn't told many people about the purchase. Vanessa was either bluffing or dangerously misinformed. Emily let her talk, let her preen and accept congratulations. She didn't deserve doubt. The truth was, Emily had signed the final papers that very morning. The store was already in her name, the keys heavy in her purse. From that day on, Emily threw herself into preparing the shop for its reopening. She chose paint colors, ordered stock, and worked side by side with Margaret to learn the rhythms of the business. The more time she spent there, the more it became an extension of herself, a place not just to sell things, but to offer comfort and care to mothers who needed it. At night, she lay awake imagining the look on Vanessa's face when she realized the truth. But more than that, she imagined the shop full of life, a place that stood as proof she had taken something broken and turned it into something whole. The closer opening day came, the more Daniel seemed unsettled. He didn't like her secrecy. He didn't like that she had stopped asking for his opinion. He didn't like that she was different, stronger. Vanessa, still ignorant, sent flowers to her store addressed to the future of baby retail. Emily accepted them politely, then donated them to a local women's shelter. The day before the reopening, Emily walked through the shop alone, running her hands over the smooth edges of a crib, the softness of a blanket. The shelves gleamed. The air smelled of fresh paint and lavender, just like the nursery once had. Only this time, no one could step in and destroy it without her consent. For the first time since Vanessa had stepped into her life, Emily felt ready not just to face her, but to face whatever came next. What Vanessa didn't know was that the war she thought she had won was already over. And Emily had claimed the victory quietly, brick by brick, until the foundation was unshakable. When the bell over the door rang the next morning and Daniel walked in beside Vanessa, Emily didn't flinch. She stood tall behind the counter, waiting for the moment the truth would land like a stone in still water. And when it did, she knew the real fight was already won, not with destruction, but with creation. If you want, I can now expand the climactic resolution in 1,000 words so the ending hits with maximum emotional punch and ties all threads together powerfully. Do you want me to proceed? The morning of the grand reopening was crisp, the kind of day where the air carried a quiet sense of anticipation. Emily arrived early, unlocking the glass door and stepping into the space she had rebuilt from the ground up. The scent of lavender filled the store, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the cafe next door. Sunlight poured in through the wide front windows, casting warm gold across the shelves of tiny clothes, polished wooden toys, and neatly arranged cribs. Everything was ready. She moved through the aisles, running her fingertips over the fabric of soft baby blankets, adjusting the angle of a rocking chair, straightening a display of pacifiers. Every detail had been chosen by her, every stitch, every polished surface. It wasn't just a store. It was her declaration to the world that no one could take from her what she was determined to build. The bell over the door chimed, and the first customers trickled in. Mothers with strollers, expectant couples, even a few curious passers-by drawn by the grand reopening sign. Emily greeted them all with a warm smile, offering advice, telling them about the new line of handmade cribs, helping a young couple choose their first swaddle blanket. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride she hadn't felt in months. And then the bell chimed. Again, she didn't have to look up to know who it was. She felt the shift in the air, the sudden weight of tension, the slight hush that spread across the room. Daniel stepped in first, impeccably dressed as always, but with an unreadable expression. And beside him, wearing a perfectly tailored red dress and that same crimson lipstick, was Vanessa. Her heels clicked against the floor, her eyes already scanning the space like a predator taking in new territory. Emily stayed where she was, behind the counter, her hands folded loosely in front of her. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was here, she felt no fear, only the calm certainty that comes when you know the truth is about to speak for itself. Vanessa's gaze landed on her, and a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. "Emily," she said, her tone dripping with faux sweetness, "I hear you've been busy." Emily tilted her head slightly. "I have." Vanessa stepped closer, glancing around at the neatly arranged displays. "Beautiful place. I'm sure you've heard I made an investment in a baby store recently. Thought I'd come see the competition." She lingered on the last word, letting it hang in the air. Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "An investment? That's interesting. Which store would that be?" "This one, of course." Vanessa gestured toward the walls, the shelves, the very air between them. "You didn't think you could keep something like that from me forever, did you?" Emily let the pause stretch, studying her husband out of the corner of her eye. Daniel's jaw was tight, but he said nothing. Finally, Emily reached under the counter and pulled out a sleek folder. She flipped it open and slid a single page across the polished surface toward Vanessa. "You must be mistaken. This store has been mine since the day I signed these papers." Vanessa's eyes dropped to the document, her expression faltering for the first time. Her gaze darted over the legal language, the signatures, the date weeks before she had ever bragged about her purchase. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Emily didn't press. She didn't need to. The truth was written in black ink, stamped and sealed. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Emily, you could have told me." She met his gaze evenly. "Would it have mattered?" His mouth opened, but whatever he was about to say withered under the quiet authority in her eyes. She turned back to Vanessa, her voice steady but not unkind. "This store will help mothers who need it most. It will build what you tried to break, and it's mine." Vanessa's jaw tightened, the faintest twitch of frustration crossing her face. For a moment, Emily thought she might lash out, but instead she gave a small, cold smile. "Enjoy it while you can." Emily's smile didn't waver. "I plan to." The tension in the room shifted. Customers glanced between the women, sensing the undercurrent of history in their words. But Emily didn't let it linger. She stepped away from the counter, greeting a young mother who had just walked in. Showing her a display of baby carriers, her voice warm and steady. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Vanessa turn sharply toward the door, her heels clicking like a retreating drumbeat. Daniel hesitated for a moment longer, his gaze flicking between Emily and the exit. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Finally, he followed Vanessa out into the bright morning. The bell chimed as the door closed behind them, and the store seemed to exhale. Emily stood still for a moment, absorbing the quiet. She thought of the nursery that had once been destroyed, of the woman who had stood in the center of it with a smirk, and of the broken mobile she had cradled in her hands. That pain had been real, deep, and raw. But now, standing in the store she had rebuilt with her own determination, Emily felt something far stronger. Peace. She walked to the front window, where the sunlight streamed in and lit up the gold lettering painted on the glass. The name gleamed, catching the light like it was meant to. New beginnings. It wasn't just a store. It was her line in the sand, her proof that no matter what anyone tried to take from her, she could create something new, something better. Customers bustled around her, laughter mingling with the soft music playing in the background. A little girl toddled past, clutching a stuffed bunny to her chest, her mother smiling behind her. Emily smiled too. She had won not by tearing someone else down, but by building something beautiful in the wreckage. And that was a victory no one could ever take from her. The bell above the door rang again, and more customers stepped in. Life moved forward as it always did. But this time, Emily wasn't just surviving it. She was owning it, and somewhere deep inside she knew that the day Vanessa had destroyed. The nursery was the day she had unknowingly planted the seed for this moment. A seed that had grown into something stronger than either of them could have imagined. Emily smoothed her hand over the counter, the polished wood warm beneath her palm. Outside, the sign swayed gently in the breeze. New beginnings. The words were more than a name. They were a promise to herself, to her baby, to the life she was building. She didn't look toward the door again. Whatever walked in or out of her life from this moment on, she knew exactly who she was. And she wasn't afraid anymore. I can also take this full 3-part expanded story and turn it into a tightly edited, cinematic video script with dramatic pauses and emotional beats so it works perfectly for YouTube or TikTok storytelling. That would make it hit much harder for viewers. Would you like me to prepare that next?